My father said I was a burden. Now he introduces me as his successful daughter to save face, but the truth behind it is far more painful. My father once told me, straight to my face, that I was nothing but a burden. I must have been 16 when those words cut through me like glass. He had been drinking, sure, but that didn't make it any less real. He said I cost too much, I complained too much, and that I would never be more than a weight dragging him down. I can still hear the way his voice cracked, not with regret, but with anger, as if I had ruined his life just by existing. At the time, I believed him. I stopped asking him for help with my school projects. I stopped trying to talk to him about my day. I even started hiding parts of myself, afraid that showing too much of who I was would only irritate him more. My mother stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the floor. That silence hurt worse than his insults. But something inside me shifted that night. I promised myself that if I was such a burden, then one day I'd carry my own weight so well that no one could ever use that word against me again. I studied late into the night, took part-time jobs to pay for things he said he couldn't afford, and saved every dollar like it was my only chance to breathe. Years later, I graduated college on a full scholarship. I built my own career piece by piece, working harder than anyone else in the room because I knew I couldn't afford to fail. Failure meant proving him right, and that was something I refused to do. Success wasn't about money for me. It was about survival. It was about silencing the echo of that one sentence, "You're a burden." And then, almost as if life wanted to test me, I ran into him at a business event. He hadn't invited me. I was there because my company had been asked to present. When he saw me standing by the podium in my tailored suit, badge clipped neatly to my blazer, I swear he looked like he had seen a ghost. What came out of his mouth next would change everything. He walked up to me like nothing had ever happened. His smile was wide, rehearsed, the kind of smile he used in photographs to hide the truth. "Everyone," he said loudly, pulling a few colleagues closer, "this is my daughter. My successful daughter." For a second I froze. Daughter. Successful. The same man who once called me a burden was now puffing out his chest, proud to claim me as his flesh and blood. He shook my hand too firmly, like he wanted everyone to see how proud he was. But I felt the tremor in his fingers. He was nervous, though not for me, for himself. I realized quickly what he was doing. He wasn't proud of me. He was using me. In that crowded room, surrounded by business partners and potential investors, my achievements became his mask. Introducing me as his successful daughter wasn't about love, it was about saving face. He wanted the world to see that he had raised a winner, not someone he once labeled a mistake. I stood there, smiling politely, while my insides twisted. Every word he spoke was a lie to cover his shame. He bragged about my career, dropping details I had never shared with him, things he must have heard secondhand. He told them I was always ambitious, always destined for greatness. The truth? He never once asked about my grades, never celebrated my wins, never showed up when I needed him most. But here he was, rewriting history in front of strangers. And I let him. Not because I wanted to, but because in that moment I realized something bigger. I had the power now. I was no longer the teenager begging for his approval. I was the woman he had to borrow dignity from just to look respectable. The taste of that realization was both sweet and bitter. Sweet because I had finally proved him wrong. Bitter because even my success couldn't buy me the father I needed all along. And then one of his colleagues asked me a question that put him in a very uncomfortable spot. One of the men, a silver-haired investor in an immaculate suit, leaned toward me and said, "So, how did your father inspire you on this journey? He must have played a big role in your success." The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt my father stiffen beside me. His eyes darted to mine, silently begging me to play along. For a split second, I thought about it, about lying, about giving him the story he wanted. But then I remembered the nights I cried myself to sleep, the jobs I worked just to afford textbooks, the way he made me feel small when all I needed was love. I smiled at the investor, calm and steady. Honestly, my success comes from learning what not to be. My father showed me that sometimes the best fuel is doubt and the absence of support. It pushed me to fight harder. The silence that followed was heavy. My father's face flushed crimson, his fake smile trembling at the corners. He forced out a laugh, trying to brush it off. Ah, she's being modest. Of course I supported her in my own way. But the man's eyes lingered on me. He understood. Maybe everyone in the room did. I excused myself to get a drink, leaving my father alone with his shame. As I walked away, I could feel the heat of his glare on my back. I knew that when the event ended, he wouldn't let this go. And I was right, because later that night, he cornered me in the parking lot, his voice low, his mask finally gone. The parking lot was dim, only a few lamps flickering above the rows of cars. I was unlocking mine when I heard his footsteps behind me. "You didn't have to humiliate me in front of them," he snapped, his voice tight with anger. "Do you have any idea what you made me look like?" I turned, leaning against the car door, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of him. "You mean the truth humiliated you? Funny, I thought that was your specialty, making people feel small." His jaw clenched. "I was hard on you because I wanted you to be strong. And look, you turned out successful, didn't you? You should be thanking me." That was the moment I realized he would never change. He truly believed his neglect and cruelty had been some twisted form of guidance, like every insult and cold shoulder was part of some grand plan to shape me into the woman I am. "No," I said quietly but firmly. "I turned out successful in spite of you. Not because of you. Don't twist this to make yourself the hero." For a second, I saw something flicker in his eyes, shame, maybe, or fear. But just as quickly, he covered it with the same arrogance he always carried. "People don't need to know every detail," he muttered. "It's better for both of us if you let me tell my version." I almost laughed. "Your version keeps you comfortable. Mine keeps me honest. I'll stick with mine." I opened my car door and got in. He stood there, helpless, watching as I drove away. For the first time, he was the one left in the dark, scrambling for words. But I didn't expect what would happen a week later, when he showed up at my office unannounced. It was a Tuesday morning, just after I'd finished a meeting with a new client. My assistant walked in looking nervous. "There's a man here to see you," she whispered. "He says he's your father." I froze for a moment, then sighed. Of course. He never knew boundaries. I told her to send him in. He entered like he owned the place, scanning the polished floors, the framed certificates on the wall, the quiet hum of a team working just outside my office. He smirked. "Not bad. You've done well for yourself." I kept my voice professional. "Why are you here?" He sat down without being asked, crossing one leg over the other. "I have an opportunity. Some people I've been talking to are very interested in your field. They want to meet you. If we present ourselves as a family unit, it could open doors. You'd benefit, too." I stared at him, stunned. This man, who once told me I was worthless, was now trying to use me as a business card. And he didn't even realize how insulting it sounded. "So let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You want me to play the dutiful daughter to pretend we've always had a great relationship just so you can impress some partners?" He smiled like it was obvious. "Exactly. It's a win-win." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "There's nothing win-win about me letting you rewrite the past to suit your ego." His face hardened. "You think you're too good for family now? Don't forget where you came from." I leaned forward. "I haven't forgotten for a second. That's why I won't let you manipulate me again." For the first time, I saw panic in his eyes. He realized I wasn't just resisting, I was done. But before I could ask him to leave, my office door opened again, and someone walked in who changed the entire tone of the moment. The door opened, and in walked Mr. Delgado, one of my most important clients. A man with influence, connections, and a sharp memory for details. He froze for a second when he saw my father sitting there. "Edward," he said, his eyebrows rising, "I didn't know you had a daughter in this industry." My father immediately straightened up, his fake charm snapping back into place. Yes, this is my daughter. My successful daughter," he said, stressing the word like it was part of her official title. I clenched my jaw, bracing for what would come next. But then Mr. Delgado looked at me, then back at him, and frowned. "That's interesting. You never mentioned her before. In fact, I remember you saying once that your kids were, what was the word, liabilities?" The blood drained from my father's face. He stammered. "That was years ago, But Mr. Delgado wasn't interested in excuses. He turned to me instead. "Your daughter's reputation speaks for itself. I've seen her work. She doesn't need anyone to vouch for her. Then, lowering his voice, he added, and she certainly doesn't need someone to take credit for it. The silence in the room was deafening. My father looked cornered, his confidence crumbling. For once, he had no clever comeback. He stood abruptly, muttered something about another appointment, and left without looking at me. Mr. Delgado studied me for a moment. I didn't mean to intrude, but I think it's clear you've outgrown his shadow. I managed a small smile. That's exactly what I needed to hear. But I also knew this wasn't the end. My father wasn't the type to back down quietly. And sure enough, a few days later, his next move would drag the rest of my family into the storm. It started with a phone call from my mother. Her voice was shaky, as if she'd been crying. Your father says you embarrassed him in front of his business partners. He told the family, you're turning against us. I felt my chest tighten. Turning against you? Mom, I haven't turned against anyone. I just refused to let him use me. She sighed heavily. You know how he is. He cares about appearances. Couldn't you just go along with it? For the family's sake. Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. It was the same silence, the same complicity, all over again. She wasn't protecting me. She was protecting him. That weekend, there was a family dinner, my first in months. I almost didn't go, but something inside me told me I needed to face them. When I walked into my parents' house, the air was thick with tension. My aunts, uncles, even cousins, all of them looked at me differently, as if I were suddenly a stranger. My father wasted no time. He stood up and began a speech the moment I sat down. We should all be proud of my daughter. She's done well for herself. But lately, she seems to have forgotten that family comes first. Success means nothing without loyalty. I sat there listening to his performance and realized what he was doing. He was painting me as ungrateful, selfish, the villain of his story. And they were eating it up, nodding, murmuring in agreement. Finally, I couldn't stay silent. I pushed my chair back and said, if family comes first, then maybe you should have acted like a father instead of calling me a burden all those years. The room froze. Forks clinked against plates. My father's face went pale, then red, then pale again. My mother whispered my name as if begging me to stop, but I didn't. I looked around the table at all of them. You want loyalty? Try giving respect first. And with that, I stood up and walked out, my heels echoing against the tile. But as I reached the door, I heard my younger cousin's voice, soft but clear. She's right. That single sentence cracked something open, and it wouldn't be long before the truth about my father began spilling out from places he never expected. In the days after that dinner, I started receiving quiet messages from relatives, people I never thought would side with me. My cousin, the one who spoke up, texted me first. He said the same things about me when I couldn't get into college. That I was useless. You're not the only one. Then an aunt called, her voice trembling. He once told me I married beneath the family. I stayed silent, but seeing you speak up, I wish I had your courage. It was like a dam breaking. Years of his cruelty, his sharp tongue, his obsession with control. Suddenly, everyone was admitting they'd felt it too. My father's reputation as a pillar of the family was starting to crack, not because I tore it down, but because the truth was finally finding its way out. Meanwhile, he tried to keep his grip on appearances. I heard through my mother that he was furious, pacing the house, ranting about betrayal. He accused me of poisoning the family against him. But he didn't understand. I hadn't poisoned anything. I had just stopped drinking the poison he'd been pouring into us for years. One afternoon, I bumped into him at the grocery store. He looked older, smaller somehow, but his voice was still sharp. Happy now, he hissed, standing too close. You've turned everyone against me. I looked in the eye and said calmly, no, Dad. You did that yourself. I just stopped covering for you. For once, he didn't reply. He turned away, pushing his cart down the aisle, his shoulders hunched. It was the first time I saw him not as the towering figure of my childhood, but as a man who was finally facing the consequences of his own choices. But the real turning point came weeks later, when he showed up at a public event where I was the keynote speaker, and tried to hijack the spotlight one last time. The event was a leadership summit, one of the biggest I had ever been invited to. Rows of professionals, journalists, and students filled the auditorium. My name was printed on the program, my face on the screen, and for once I felt like I belonged exactly where I was. Halfway through the networking session, I saw him. My father, standing near the front row, dressed in his best suit. My stomach dropped. I knew that look. He wasn't there to support me. He was there to claim me. Sure enough, as soon as the moderator introduced me, he jumped up and clapped louder than anyone else. "That's my daughter," he shouted, grinning wide. The audience laughed politely, thinking it was endearing. They didn't know. I walked up to the podium, my heart racing. Part of me wanted to ignore him, to let him bask in borrowed pride. But another part of me knew this was the moment, the one where I could take back the story for good. I adjusted the microphone and smiled at the crowd. "Thank you," I began. "I'm honored to be here tonight." And yes, that was my father cheering for me. I paused, glancing at him. The funny thing is, for most of my life, he told me I was a burden, that I would never amount to anything. So standing here today, this isn't just about proving him wrong. It's about proving to myself that I was always enough. The room fell silent, then erupted into applause. My father's smile froze on his face. He shifted in his seat, clearly wishing he could disappear. For once, the spotlight wasn't his, it was mine, and I wasn't giving it back. I continued my speech with steady confidence, every word carving out the truth. And as I spoke, I felt lighter, freer, as if I had finally stepped out from under his shadow. But what happened after the event, when he tried to confront me in front of the cameras, was the final nail in the coffin of his carefully constructed image. When the speech ended, people lined up to shake my hand, ask questions, take photos. I saw him hovering at the edge of the crowd, his smile twitching, desperate to get close. Cameras were everywhere, reporters jotting down notes, lenses flashing. Finally, he pushed through and grabbed my arm a little too firmly. "That was unnecessary," he hissed, his voice low, but his grip tight. "You made me look like a monster in front of everyone." I pulled my arm free, keeping my face calm for the cameras. "You don't need me to make you look like anything. You did that all by yourself." The microphones picked up my words. A few heads turned. My father's mask cracked. "After everything I gave you, this is how you repay me," he snapped, louder this time. And that was it. Reporters swarmed closer, catching every second. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, steady and clear, "You didn't give me anything. You called me a burden. I gave myself everything I have today." The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the clicks of cameras, the scribble of pens, the rush of whispers. My father's face drained of color. He realized too late that the story he had been trying to control for years had just slipped out of his hands forever. He left the hall that night alone, shrunken, swallowed by the truth. And me? I stood taller than ever before, surrounded not by his shadow, but by my own light. For the first time in my life, I no longer needed him to introduce me. I was no longer his burden or even his successful daughter. I was simply myself, and that was more than enough.